introduce President Woodrow Wilson and First Lady Edith Bolling Wilson. A round of applause, please.
Yay, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson!
Speech, Mr. President.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Mrs. Wilson and I come in celebration. The guns are still. The Great War is over. We received the news at 3 a.m. that the Armistice was signed. Everything for which America fought has been accomplished. It is now our fortunate duty to assist in the establishment of just democracy throughout the world. Now that I've made the official announcement, I would like to introduce my helpmate, my confidant, my wife, Edith Bolling Wilson.
It's such an honor to share the exhilaration of this day with you. You might be interested to know what we did when we heard the news. We stood mute. We were unable to grasp the full significance of those words. But when the confirmation of the actual signing reached the public, pandemonium broke loose.
We can think of no better way to enjoy this celebration than being with you. Despite the months of mounting tensions and troubles during the past several years, I have been able to persevere because Edith Bolling came into my life as a gift from God. I am extremely proud of the honor that a daughter of Whitfield, Virginia has conferred upon me by becoming my wife.
After I met President Wilson in the spring of 1915, soon after the war in Europe had begun, my life changed forever.
We want to share about our lives at the White House with you leading up to today's momentous occasion.
We were married on December the 15th, 1915.
We were to have a 3-week honeymoon at the Homestead Resort in Hot Springs, Virginia. But unfortunately, our idyllic time was cut short by a week. The Germans had broken their promise to avoid attacking non-combatant and neutral shipping. A German submarine torpedoed a British passenger liner and 2 Americans were killed. We had to return to Washington.
We hated to leave the homestead, but we soon fell into a routine at the White House. The spring of 1916 was full of stress.
But Edith, you cannot imagine how much easier having you by my side has made my life.
Right from the very beginning, the president knew that he could trust me.
She is my sounding board. I share everything with her. Talking things over with Edith clarifies my ideas.
He quickly taught me to use his private secret code.
I use this to communicate with my emissaries abroad and to conduct foreign affairs.
The president writes his messages out in longhand, I encode them, and then he types the code numbers on his typewriter.
Because Edith also decodes the incoming messages, she's the only other person besides me who has seen the complete picture of American foreign affairs.
And this is quite a change for someone who only 3 years before knew absolutely nothing about politics. 1916 went by quickly because we were preparing for re-election.
The progressive reforms of my first term, establishing a personal income tax, passing the Federal Reserve Act, and revising the antitrust law resulted in a concerted effort to replace me. The race was extremely close.
I had already begun making plans for our life after we left the White House.
We did prevail for a second term. Although I had campaigned on the platform of neutrality, remaining out of the war in Europe became increasingly more difficult.
The president did everything that he could to avoid going to war.
In January 1917, Germany declared unconditional submarine warfare, and after a number of our ships were sunk and American lives were lost, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Much to my regret, the United States entered the war. In my speech to Congress on April 2nd, I said, we will not choose the path of submission. We must make the world safe for democracy.
The cheering crowds in the cabinet that day pledged themselves to that lofty campaign. At that moment, I thought my heart would burst. But later, he held my hand so tightly that it hurt.
Think about what the applause at the Capitol and from the people lining the streets meant. My message was a message of death to our young men.
I thought his heart would break as he spoke of the tragedies inseparable from war. We seem to be living in a world spun out of control.
My mother did not raise her son to be a wartime president, but unity was my driving force. There were many types of service and self-sacrifice in which every one of our countrymen could engage.
Almost immediately, the ladies of the cabinet and I took a pledge to live more simply and buy simple clothing and food. The White House, like most Americans, practiced meatless Mondays, wheatless Wednesdays, and gasless Sundays, and there were victory gardens everywhere. I did a stint with the Red Cross by sewing surgical gowns and pajamas for the soldiers. The president and I also put a flock of sheep on the White House lawn. Now, we received much undue criticism for doing this, but when the sheep were sheared and the White House wool auctioned off, almost $100,000 was donated to the Red Cross. I also did a stint with the Red Cross by feeding the soldiers as they came through Washington.
As the troop trains came through Washington on their way to the coast to board ships for Europe, I often visited with the soldiers, offering them encouragement.
We also invited the soldiers to the White House. The president always urged them to keep their faith in God. You remember that one young soldier who said, "Sir, you wouldn't promise us, would you, to always read a chapter in your Bible every night?"
I promised him I would with all my heart. He said it would make it easier for him if he could count on me.
The dark shadow of the war cast its great length across our great nation.
But my emphasis on the war had two fundamentals. First, that we would have to submit to a national draft. And second, that our soldiers would not fight as replacements for the Allies, but would fight together under the American flag.
By May, only 30,000 men had signed up. So the Selective Service Bill passed almost immediately. But by June, 10 million men between the ages of 19 and 30 had signed up for the draft. This was a fair and functional system.
When the Army swelled to over 500,000, new problems arose daily.
Imagine housing and feeding and transporting that many men. It was a monumental task.
We had to centralize many agencies and industries under one command. Rugged individuals came together for a common cause.
In May, thousands of soldiers under the leadership of General John J. Pershing were headed toward Europe. Right from their very first meeting, the president knew that he could trust the general.
The general felt the same as I and did not want his soldiers to lose their national identity. He arrived in Europe with several thousand troops to establish his command and to demonstrate support for the Allies.
Under the leadership of General Pershing and other valiant soldiers such as Captain Harry S. Truman and Captain George Patton,
Captain Edward Rickenbacker and Sergeant Alvin York, our troops fought valiantly.
there had been 4 years of horrendous warfare with no sight of victory for either side.
But the Battle of Bella Wood, which lasted for nearly the month of June, ended with an American-led victory.
Not only was it a military victory, but it was also a psychological boost.
Our men went in force into the line of battle at the crucial moment when the whole fate of the world seemed to hang in the balance, and in time to turn the tide of the war in favor of the Allies.
As early as November 1916, the president had drafted a peace note to all the powers who were at war.
As a person in high authority, I felt that I was at liberty to hold nothing back. I suggested that it was an unparalleled opportunity for the statesmen of the world to make peace possible. I had hoped to produce a series of terms that would deliver an enduring peace.
At the time, he thought that that might be his greatest piece of writing. However, as it turns out, those were only the seeds for the ideas that he has now.
I have expanded my ideas to 14 points. The single theme running throughout the text is the principle of justice for all people and nations. All should have the right to live in liberty and safety with one another, whether they are strong or weak.
On October the 7th, the Swiss minister was delivered a note from the German government asking for an immediate armistice and requesting that President Wilson initiate a peace plan based on his 14 points.
This was glorious news. It has been the most hectic 4 weeks of the war for me. I handled all negotiations on behalf of the Allies. My chief executive, Colonel Edward House, is in Europe to represent me.
The cables have flown back and forth between them constantly. I have worked early and late coding and decoding those messages.
On November 7th, the United Press Association's office in Paris cabled their headquarters in New York that Germany and the Allies had signed an armistice.
Within half an hour, the news had spread nationwide. Newspaper headlines claimed that the armistice had been signed. The crowds outside the White House were euphoric. But the president would not speak to those throngs because he knew that the news was premature.
Then on the morning of November 8th, the European correspondents got their story straight and retracted their news.
The New York Globe characterized this misunderstanding as the greatest and most cruel hoax in the history of journalism.
But in the meantime, on the outskirts of the French village of Raton, the delegates from all sides were ironing out the details. It was agreed that the armistice would officially begin on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month.
Colonel House's early morning telegram stated, "Autocracy is dead. Long live democracy."
A supreme moment in history has come. The hand of God has been laid upon all the nations, and through it all, how fine the spirit of our nation has been. What a sense of unity and purpose.
The war could not have been won without the contributions of the brave warriors both on the front and in support. Those of us who stayed at home also did our duty.
In summary, the object of the war upon which all free men have set their hearts has been attained. The military autocracy of Germany has been defeated. Thus, this great war has come to an end. God bless the United States of America.
We thank the President and Mrs. Wilson for sharing with us today. These actors are volunteers from the Edith Bolling Wilson Birthplace Museum in Wytheville, Virginia. Jim Gerhardt portrays President Wilson. He was born in Roanoke, Virginia, and graduated from VMI with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, and he worked in the engineering department of the Norfolk Southern Corporation for 35 years. After his retirement in 2006, Jim and wife Mary moved to Wythe County. Betsy Ely portrays First Lady Edith Bolling Wilson. She is a retired English teacher and has always loved the theater. She, her husband Tom, their 2 daughters, and their families are all involved in the arts. She resides in Wytheville. The Wilsons are a part of the museum's active educational programming and have presented at the Commission's statewide teacher symposiums, as well as other events throughout the state. We thank them for being here with us today.